Good morning. How is everyone this morning? Good? Okay. Well, it's good to be here with you all this morning. And we are in our series, Call to Action, which is taken from James. And we are going to be in chapter 4 this morning. Anyone have plans for this afternoon? Maybe you're going to go down to the waterfront, right? And you're going to go down to, was it Worship PDX? And Matt Redmond's going to be playing down there. Maybe you have plans for the week, right? Maybe you got work plans. Maybe you're on holiday. You're just going to relax and hang out. Or maybe you're going to get away. You know, we've got plans coming up. We've got a partner team coming this next week. We're going to do some stuff around about town. Like promote VBS for one thing. And so we have all these plans, but how confident are you that you're going to pull your plans off? One of my favorite films is a film called Flushed Away. And maybe you know this film. It's about a rat, right? Roddy St. James, he's a very pampered rat too. And he lives in this gilded cage. And he's looked after by this family. But the family goes off, I don't know where they go off, on holiday or something. They leave him a pile of food. And Roddy is free. And he also has some plans about how to spend his time. And his plans are going okay, but then his plans are interrupted. Because this other rat arrives, who is not a pampered rat, but he is in fact a sewer rat. And his name is Sid. And Sid kind of takes over the place. And Roddy doesn't really like that because Sid is interrupting his plans, right? But Roddy comes up with another plan and invites Sid to come and join him in a jacuzzi. Well, here's how Roddy's plan goes.
You know what you are? You're a real gent.
Well, after a hard day of navigating sewer pipes, there's nothing better than relaxing in a jacuzzi whirlpool bath.
That looks so inviting.
Oh, yes, the water looks perfect. Now, you hop in, and I'll press this lever to get the bubbles going.
Right, in we go. Oh, wait. I know we got off on the wrong foot before, right? But you know, I really think we're going to get along, don't you?
Swimmingly.
Be seeing you, my friend.
You plonker! You think I don't know a toilet when I see one?
You were gonna flush me down the loo.
No. It's a big jacuzzi, deluxe model.
But then you won't mind if I get the bubbles going, will ya?
No, not the lever. Have mercy. No, I can't swim.
Bon voyage, me old cream cracker. Hold your
Stop.
nose.
You can't do this.
You were gonna try and flush me.
Let's see how you like it.
Have you seen my dad?
I can't swim. I'm in the sewer! Hello? Help. I'm gonna open my eyes and I'm gonna be home. It's all a bad dream. Oh, I'm not home. I want to go home. Shush. Stop it, Roddy. Stop it, I want to go home. Put something that I can't. I'm just frightened. Stop it. All right, Roddy, old man. You can get yourself out of here. And you will. Never forget, the blood of the courageous St. James clan flows through your veins.
Poor old Roddy flushed down the potty. You know, that kind of happens to our plans at times, doesn't it? And when our plans get flushed down the loo, we don't really like it that much, because we like to feel that we're in control, and we like to feel that we stand on the brim of success, don't we? And what could go wrong, because after all, they are our plans. Well, James has something to say about plans this morning. And he says that really that no matter how good our plans are, they are all in danger of being flushed away. Let's read James. We're going to start in 4:13, and we're going to read through 5:6. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. So James is issuing a call to action to those who say. And it's not really the first time that James has issued a call to action to those who say in his letter. You may remember back, we talked about how James said, well, you say that you have faith, but what good is saying that you have faith if there's no evidence of faith in your life? If there's nothing actually concrete to show in your life that you have faith. Now, it's not for us to judge whether somebody's works is evidence enough of their faith. That's up to the Lord. But if you look at your life and you say that you have faith, James says, and you have no evidence of that faith being worked out in real life, then you might want to have a closer look to see exactly what it is that you believe. And we could say that we have plans, right? We can have all the plans we like, but if our plans are not acted on, well, they're just plans, right? They're notes in our planners, in our schedules, on our notepads, and they sit there and they gather dust. Because it's easier to have plans, right, than it is to use a favorite word, to execute those plans. Because execution of plans takes effort, it takes a struggle, it takes some work, it takes resolve. Like I've read, that lots of people have a plan to write a book. And I'm kind of one of those people that has a plan to write a book. And yet most people don't ever write a book, do they? It always remains just a plan. In fact, someone I read said, we like the idea of having written a book more than we do the actual writing of the book. And the same is often true of faith, isn't it? We like the idea of faith. We like the idea of following Jesus. And it's a lot easier to say, oh, I want to follow Jesus, than it is to actually put that into action. In fact, Jesus met lots of people like that. Oh, I'll follow you, Jesus. But when it came down to actually following Jesus and putting that plan into action, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. So is James against plans and planning? Maybe we should start there first. Well, he's not, is he? Because, you know, he's for God, and God isn't against planning. God is a God of order, not a God of disorder. And if you don't have a plan, then you end up with disorder, right? If we don't have a plan, a goal, something that we're shooting for, guess what we hit? Nothing, right? We're all over the place. So God has a plan, and God's plan is for people to know him, for people to enjoy him, people to worship him, to experience his presence. That's why he made creation, so we could meet God in this place. Not because God is a narcissist, right? He doesn't need our worship, but there is nothing greater than God. And if there's nothing greater than God, then there's nothing greater that we can experience and enjoy than God himself. Everything that we have around us in this world is just simply an appetizer pointing us to God. So God created the heavens and the earth, and he created this perfect environment for human flourishing. But God's plan wasn't good enough for us because we liked our own plans better. And so, starting with the first human beings, they acted out on their own plans, and we've all followed suit down the road, haven't we? So was God's plan flushed away? Did God go, oh my goodness, what am I going to do next? Plan B, plan C, plan D? No. His plan was from beginning to end. And his plan continued on, didn't it? He had some covenants that he brought in, like he made a covenant with Abraham about who his descendants were going to be like the sand. He made a covenant then with Moses about entering his people going into the promised land, that if they were to follow God's ways, then they could stay in the promised land. He made a covenant with David that his descendants would sit on the throne forever. But God's plan was always that it was going to be fulfilled in his son, Jesus Christ. He was going to bring greater joy, greater glory. He was going to reveal himself in a fuller, more marvelous, more wondrous way than anything he'd done before through his son, Jesus Christ. Jesus did not end up on the cross by accident. It was God's plan all along to show us how much he loves us. And that's so important for us, right? Because we can get in on God's plan, even now, even though that we've all naffed off and done our own thing and had our own plans, and yet we can turn away from our plans and turn back to God's plan. And the good news is that God wants to bring us back into his plan through his son, Jesus Christ. So now what, right? So we live in this world, so should we not really make plans? We're just going to rely on God's plan, that's it. I mean, it sounds nice, right? But we still have to make plans, don't we? And we have to be intentional about doing things. But on the other hand, we kind of have to realize that our plans maybe are not infallible. You know, it's comforting to me to realize that, you know, even people, great saints of the past, like James himself, made plans that didn't entirely work out the way that he thought they were going to work out. For instance, when Paul came back from his third missionary journey to Jerusalem, there was a lot of uproar because people heard that Paul was coming, and the Jews didn't like Paul because they thought that Paul was against the law and was going around teaching people to ignore the law. So James came up with this plan about how Paul could show that actually he was for the Jews, and he would take these three or four men anyway, who were making a vow, and he would pay for them and take them into the temple, and it would show, right, that Paul was actually bang on, and he was all on board still with the Jews. Of course, James's plan didn't really work out terribly well, because it almost got Paul killed. And yet, even in the midst of that, God used that, didn't he? Because he took Paul, and he took Paul to Rome, which is where Paul wanted to go. Didn't quite end up getting there in the way that he thought he was going to get there. But when he got to Rome, he didn't just get to Rome, but he got into the very heart of Rome, because he was under the Praetorian Guard, and these guards were like in the seat of Roman government, and they were changing in and out all the time. And guess what they got to hear Paul talk about? The gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. So I want to talk about this morning James's call to action about us making plans, or really about how not to make plans. And the first thing that James says is, don't make plans that are autonomous. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. So these are plans that are made without any regard to God. They're just based solely on our own judgment and what we can see. You know, I was sharing, I think it was last week, with the leadership team, that the next series I preach, I'm going to be a little more careful, because some of this stuff that I've been preaching through in James, it's kind of has like personal application here lately, and been living it out. 3 weeks ago, and many of you know this story, Leslie, my wife, and I, it was a Saturday evening, and we were just enjoying some quiet time. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening, and it was actually the beginning of the quarter. And guess what? I had my planner out, and I was going through my calendar, and I was filling in, and I had a busy month, and lots of stuff, and lots of plans that I was making, right? And about that time, Leslie's phone goes, and it's our youngest son FaceTiming her. And our youngest son he's staying in Redmond, and we have a house in Redmond. And that's interesting. I wonder why he's FaceTiming us. And then the image comes on, and he's standing in our hallway, and he's showing us a picture of the ceiling, and there is water pouring through the ceiling. And he's saying, well, I need some more towels, because there's water everywhere, and it's been coming from the toilet upstairs, and I think it's been running all day long. And it was a bit beyond just finding some more towels to do some mop-up work. And of course, it has caused a lot of damage. And suddenly, all those plans that I was writing out in my planner, a lot of them have been literally flushed away. I had a plan to go to a retreat in Alaska, and that got flushed away. Plan for some other things, and that's got flushed away. Little did I know, right, as I was writing out those plans in that planner, it was already being flushed away. Of course, God knew that, right? I don't think God was chuckling about it as he saw me fill out my planner. He's not like that. But he knew, right? Well, mate, you shouldn't waste your time doing that. You know, we make our plans in our little autonomous sphere, don't we? Because we are physical creatures. We're limited by time and space. We are not all-knowing. We are not all-seeing. And we are not all-powerful. We are not autonomous, because things happen outside of our vision that we don't see them coming. God sees them coming, but we don't see them coming. And just because we plan something in life, right, that does not mean it is going to happen. Life can intervene in unexpected ways. You know, as that saying, isn't it, that expectations will kill you. And that's true, right? Because we have those expectations, you know, that things are going to work out a certain way, just ordinary things during our day. And we don't even know that with any certainty that that's going to happen. We can make all the plans we like, but we simply don't have the power and insight to guarantee them. But that doesn't stop us from doing it, though, does it? Because we live in this world which tells us that it's all about us and it's all about our plans and everything is just here to fulfill my plans, and that becomes our expectation, right? We have products and we have services that are just queuing up. Hey, Bryan, mate, let us help you fulfill your plans, right? Just tell us your plans, your dreams, and we'll help fulfill them, and they help make us look autonomous. And we surround ourselves with people and things that tell us that, right? There's a story in I think it's 2 Kings, and it's about King Ahab. And he's going to go off and fight the Syrians, and he gets the king of Judah to come and help him, Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat says, yeah, you know, before we go off to this plan of yours, are there any prophets here that can tell us whether this is going to work out or not? And so Ahab gathers all these prophets, right? And they're all going, yes, yes, go and fight. You're going to win. It's going to be great. You're going to be victorious, right? And Jehoshaphat goes, yeah, but is there a prophet of the Lord around here that can help, you know, give us any hint about whether this plan is going to work? And Ahab goes, well, yeah, there is, but I really hate him because he never prophesies anything good for me. He never tells me what I want to hear. And truly, though, Micaiah is brought in before the 2 kings, and he goes, oh yeah, go out and fight, you're going to have a great victory. And then Ahab says, look, how many times do I have to tell you? Tell me the truth. And Micaiah says, yeah, you're going to die. And you're going to lose the battle, and Israel is going to be wiped out. You know, even in the church, we do this too. It's so easy, isn't it, that we make it all about our plans, and God is just there to help us fulfill our plans. He's nothing more than really a genie, right? We want to rub the lamp. Yes, Master, what can I do to fulfill your plans? It's kind of what the prosperity gospel and word of faith is all about. And we band about these scriptures that, bless you, that we take out of context, you know. Like Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. And we go, oh, that's my plan. And God's going to make it come out. And of course, we forget the context that it's snatched out of. That Jeremiah was talking about the plan that God had for Jerusalem and Judah, that Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon was about to come and completely decimate Jerusalem and kill many, many people and drag the rest off into exile 1,000 miles away for 70 years. It's probably not the plan we have in mind. James says we should say, if the Lord wills, we will go do this, or we will go do that. Again, it's not that we shouldn't make plans, but the plans we make should have the Lord in mind. You know, some ways that we can bring the Lord's will into our plans. Well, first of all, we can pray to the Lord, right? And ask him to vet our plans and open up our hands to them and seek out his guidance and his will for our plans, his wisdom. Secondly, we can look at Scripture, right? Because if our plans don't line up with what God's word has to say, then our plans are wrong. And we will be doing what we know is not right. You know, we can use the wisdom that God has already given us, right? He made us with brains. And sometimes we just need to use those brains. And we can use other people's brains as well, because we can seek godly counsel, right? And then At times, you just have to make the best decision that you can with the information that you have on hand at the time, right? And you keep praying as you go and keep looking and see where the plan leads. And sometimes that plan works out, and sometimes that plan doesn't work out the way that you thought it was going to work out. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how many people agree with our plans. It really counts only what one person has to say. The writer of Proverbs says, "Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand." So James's call to action is not for us to make autonomous plans. Neither should we make abiding plans. I know the alliteration is a bit of a stretch here, but you know me, I like my alliteration. So these traders make plans to spend a year in a place making a profit. But James warns about the brevity of life, that life is just a mist or a vapor. He already actually warned back in chapter 1 how our lives are not abiding. We will not be here forever. I want to keep reiterating here in this sermon that this is not a planner downer sermon, right? It's not like saying you should never have plans because, when you're young, it's good to have plans. It's good to dream. It's good to want to accomplish things in life. And even when you've been around a while, like some of us have, it's still okay, right? Maybe some of us have a bucket list of places and activities that we want to do before we shuffle off this mortal coil. But even when you have that bucket list, sometimes it's still hard for us to envision us actually not being here on earth. And I know, you get to a certain age and you start to draw up a plan about what's going to happen to your stuff after you go and push up the daisies, right? But even that plan, once you've made it, you stick it in the drawer and shove it out of sight, right? Because you don't really think about when that's going to happen and kind of carry on like it doesn't exist. Because we don't like our plans to have an end date, do we? But they do, because all of us have an end date. And you realize that as you get older in life, that you keep wanting to put it off, right? The 60 is now the new 40, so they say. But no matter what it might be, at some point, it is going to end. And even when you're younger, you don't know exactly when that's going to be. You see it in the news every day. People's lives end. In fact, I was shocked a couple of days ago. I saw on the news that a young man, a 21-year-old, and his girlfriend had been climbing up on North Sister in Central Oregon. And he'd fallen. And he'd fallen 300 to 500 feet. And then I read in the news, and I don't really know him, but I know his parents. Last time I read, they hadn't found his body yet. See, our bodies are fragile, and life is easily snuffed out, isn't it? And life is short, whether you're 21 or whether you're 101. But we live in this world that just wants to focus on the plans of here and now. There was a monk in 7th century England called the Venerable Bede. You know me, I like my English history. And he recorded this story about the conversion of King Edwin of Northumbria in 627 AD. And the king was considering what plan of life to follow when he was told this story by one of his counselors. "O king, it seems to me that this present life of man on earth, in comparison to that time which is unknown to us, is as if you were sitting at table in the winter with your earldom and thanes, and a fire was kindled and the hall warmed, when it rained and snowed and stormed outside. A sparrow came in and swiftly flew through the hall. That's a tongue twister. Flew through the hall. It came in at one door and it went out at the other. Now during the time when he is inside, he is not touched by the winter's storms. But that is the twinkling of an eye and the briefest of moments. And at once he comes again from winter into winter. In such a way, the life of man appears for a brief moment. What comes before and what will follow after, we do not know. Therefore, if this doctrine, Christianity, offers anything more certain or more fitting, it is right that we follow it. Because if we want an abiding plan, then our plan must align with God's plan. Because everything else is just fleeting. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow. But God's plan is the only plan which accounts for before and after, right? The beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega. And if we want to find abiding life, there's only one person we can find abiding life in, and that's in Jesus Christ. Jesus said, I came that you may have life and have it in what way? Have it abundantly, abidingly so. Abundant life which never runs out. No matter how short your plan might be, Jesus' plan is for eternity. You know, the young man that fell off North Sister. I didn't know him, but I hear that he put his faith in Jesus Christ. And I know his parents. That although their plans are in ruins right now, that their faith is in Jesus Christ. And that despite the pain and the sorrow, there is something greater. A plan that abides forever. Peter says, for all flesh is like grass, and all its glory like the flower of grass. The grass withers and the flower falls, but the word of the Lord remains forever. And this word is the good news that was preached to you. So James's call to action is for us to avoid plans which only abide here on earth and don't look further. Thirdly, James says that we shouldn't make plans that have assumptions. The traders assume everything is just going to go according to the way that they planned. In fact, so much so that they actually boast before they go off about how it's all going to work out. I think I was talking to Debbie earlier. We were talking about football and soccer, that is. And the team I support, Arsenal, are over here on pre-season. And, the season is just around the corner. And, I'm excited because I think things are going to go pretty well this season. We've got some good players that have come into the team. And, it's going to be great. Starting to make some assumptions about how things are going to go. One of my favorite bits in the Bible is the king of Syria makes this boast to the king of Israel about how he's going to come down and he's going to wipe out Israel, basically. And the king of Israel's response is, let not him who puts on his armor boast like him who takes off his armor. I think that's such a good saying. I love that saying. Because making assumptions about how our plans are going to work out is not only is it foolish, but it's also dangerous too. Jesus one time was asked to intervene in this inheritance dispute by a younger brother. And Jesus said, well, who made me an arbiter in this dispute between you and your brother? And then, as so often Jesus does, in answer to the problem and the question, he tells a story. And he tells a story about this wealthy farmer, and this wealthy farmer has a great harvest. In fact, it's a bumper harvest, and the barns that he has can't contain this harvest. And so he thinks to himself, well, what should I do? And so he decides to pull down his smaller barns and build bigger barns so he can store up this bumper harvest. And retire basically, sit back, put his feet up, and live the good life. Except his assumptions about how things were going to go had overlooked one thing, because God says, "You fool, don't you know that tonight your life will be required of you?" And then whose stuff is that going to belong to? Often we make assumptions, don't we, about our relationship with God based on how well our plans are going. It's easy for us to do that, right? We think, well, my plans are going really well, so God must be in that, right? Or my plans in life are really not going well at all, so where's God in all that? He must be against me. In fact, if you read the book of Job, that's kind of the basis of the whole thing, isn't it? That Job had a plan for life, not just his life, but his children's life, and he assumed that if he did these things, right, carried out these rituals, then God was with him. And of course, when disaster happened and he lost everything, he lost his assumptions as well. But his three friends, they didn't want to lose those assumptions because it meant, if they had to give those up, then, how can we guarantee that our plans are going to work out? And so that's kind of the basis of the book, and they argue with Job because they don't want to lose those assumptions, because it would mean that their plans weren't guaranteed either. And then God shows up at the end, doesn't he? And he asks Job a series of questions that kind of shows up that Job and his friends' assumptions, how are you ever going to control God? You're not. But that doesn't stop us making assumptions, does it? We think that because we're God's people, then God must be with us. When John the Baptist came in and he started his ministry and the crowds flocked out to see him and to be baptized, and then the Pharisees came out and John had a go at them, right? And he told them that don't presume because you say you are Abraham's children, you are in God's plan. That's my paraphrase. In fact, he says it's the ones who don't assume anything other than God's plan who are in God's plan. Sometime later, when Jesus was starting his ministry, a centurion sends a delegation to Jesus. And they asked Jesus to come to the centurion's house because the centurion has a servant who is sick. And Jesus agrees to go to the house, right? And as Jesus is on his way, the centurion sends other servants and says, "Oh, don't bother coming to my house, because I'm really not worthy that you would come under my roof. That's why I didn't really presume to come to you, Jesus. But just say the word and my servant will be healed." And then the centurion goes on to explain, right, that he too is a man under authority. He understands how these things work. And if Jesus is who he says he is, Jesus just has to say the word and his servant will be healed. And Luke goes on to say that when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him. And turning to the crowd that followed him, said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." So James's call to action is for us to assume nothing in our plans, and everything in God's plan. And lastly, James says that our plans shouldn't rely on affluence. He calls on the rich to weep and howl because miseries are coming upon them. What they thought were safe investments, right? Silver and gold, which are not supposed to corrode, well, guess what? They've corroded. And everything else is rotten and moth-eaten. All their materialistic expenditure is gone. And they've profited themselves, James says, the rich at the expense of those who work for them, because they have not paid them what they should have paid them. And the bottom line is that they've lived their lives focused on satisfying themselves at the expense of others to fulfill their plans. I think about Roddy. And he lived in his gilded cage, didn't he? And he lived in his own little affluent world, and everything was focused on him. All his plans were about him, because he was kind of protected from the outside, wasn't he, by his affluence, until he was flushed away. And his life changed, and his plans went down the toilet, didn't they? And that kind of changed his view when he lost everything. He came out with a different plan. Because very often, right, affluence makes us self-sufficient, doesn't it? We don't need anybody else's help. We can do it all ourselves. We have the resources to make our own plans succeed. And affluence can make us arrogant, and affluence can make us self-centered. Paul writing, I think it's to Timothy, isn't it, that he says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Not money itself, but the love of money. It's the love of what money can do for us. You know, it can make my plans come true, can't it? It can make my dreams come true. It can give me the life that I want to live. You know, the economic outlook in James's time was that there were a limited amount of resources, right? There was a pie, if you like. And if one person took a bigger slice of the pie, then that meant there were smaller pieces for everybody else, just slithers, in fact. So if a few rich people took big slices of the pie, then there was very little left for everybody else. That's kind of that story we just talked about, the idea of the rich farmer hoarding everything, right? This bumper harvest should have been available for everyone in that community. But by the rich farmer hoarding it all, he took a big slice of the pie, right, and left everybody else with not very much. Because again, it was an agrarian society, and so there was a harvest once a year or twice a year, and so there was only so much to go round. Now, I recognize that our economy doesn't work on quite the same principle as that. Maybe there isn't quite, there's not a limited pie. We can ramp up production. And yet, we saw in COVID, though, right? When it came to toilet paper, maybe there was only a certain amount. And when some people went to Costco and took all the toilet paper, we were only left with a few sheets. But it's not affluence. When I think of affluence, it's not just money, is it? It's knowledge and education and technology and all these other things that we're actually rich in. And maybe here's a question we need to ask ourselves. Do our plans come at the expense of others? Who is making the stuff we buy? Is our affluence and exploitation of other human beings? Do our plans come to the detriment of other human beings? And sometimes that question is not really that easy to answer, is it? I mean, we live in a complex world. And perhaps the better question is, well, do we even notice? Do we even consider what our plans have the effect that they have on those around us? Jesus told a story about a rich man who lived in luxury, whose name we don't know. But there was a beggar who lived outside his house whose name we do know. He was called Lazarus. And the rich man didn't even notice Lazarus, didn't give anything to Lazarus, lived his life in his affluence, carrying out his plans. And then both of them died. And the rich man, Jesus said, went to Hades, and he was in torment. And he looked up, and he saw Lazarus there with Abraham. And he wanted, turns out he actually did know Lazarus' name, because he asked Abraham if he could send Lazarus over to bring some water and give him some relief in the torment. But Abraham says, no, There's too big of a gap. You can't pass. And then he thinks, well, you know what? My brothers are following the same plan that I did. Perhaps send Lazarus back to warm them. And again, Abraham says, no, I'm not doing that. They've got Moses and the prophets. They have the plan. They have God's plan, right? Follow that. And then the rich man says, no, but if someone was to come back from the dead. And Abraham says to him, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. Not even someone coming back from the dead would change their plans. Because affluence, right, can blind us to God's plan. And again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have anything. I'm not saying that we shouldn't plan to have savings and retirement. We're not necessarily in the same economic culture as the first century. And it's kind of foolish not to plan, right? But we need to be really careful. The influence our affluence has on our plans, and particularly on those around us. And we need to make sure that in the midst of all that, we don't forget the greatest plan of all. Paul reminds the Corinthians, for you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. So James's last call to action is for us not to let our affluence dictate our plans. How quickly our plans can be flushed away. And sometimes they need to be flushed away so we can see God's plan more clearly, right? Because our plans are not autonomous, nor are they abiding. And sometimes we are so affluent that we think we can just pull off everything by ourselves. But at the end of the day, we need to focus on God's plan, because God's plan is everything. What is God speaking to you this morning about your plans? I'm sure we all have them, right? Short term, medium term, long term. How well do your plans align with